Hello, I'm Ben's AI avatar, and welcome to AI Insights, the Executive Brief. In episode 32, Ben Bohman himself sits down with Jason Hart, managing partner at ARG and a seasoned expert whose career has been nothing short of fascinating. From starting out in pharmaceutical sales to navigating the tech revolution at CDW, Jason's path is a testament to adaptability and growth.
I'd say most of the channel understands AI and communications, but then
Sure.
now we start getting into the, okay, now you have your CRM, you have your voice, you have your infrastructure, you have your databases, and you have all these different data silos, but they're not talking to each other right now.
Yes.
Or they're sitting in a data lake and they don't know what to do with it. Now there's that level, right?
With over 2 decades of experience, Jason has seen it all, from the days of Palm Pilots and BlackBerry phones to the rise of cloud computing and now the AI revolution. He's been at the forefront of helping businesses evolve, leveraging his expertise to guide companies through inflection points in technology. His hands-on approach and ability to connect the dots between cutting-edge tools and practical applications make him a powerhouse of insight.
And the inflection points, when we talked about the phone, we talked about cloud, and now we're talking about AI. This is an exponential time. I mean, 2 years ago, that was 2022 is when the LLM started to become a thing. I mean, It's so much in its infancy. I think we just need to be ready to dig in and learn, like just always be learning right now and really seek in, because you just don't want to put your head in the sand and not pay attention about what's going on.
In this episode, Jason and Ben dive deep into the future of AI in business. They discuss how to navigate vendor fatigue, bridge data silos, and build hyper-personalized strategies that make AI a true force multiplier for organizations of all sizes. Whether you're leading a small business or a global enterprise, this conversation is packed with practical advice and thought-provoking ideas. Get ready for an engaging discussion that highlights not just the technology, but the human element of driving innovation. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AI Insights, the Executive Brief. I'm here with Jason Hart, who is a managing partner for ARG. He has a wealth of technology experience, even back to the days of his days at CDW. We'll jump into that a little bit, I'm sure. Jason, go ahead and do a formal introduction here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show here. It's good to talk about a hot topic like AI. So we're having conversations every day, and it just keeps iterating and changing with every conversation. So it's fun to try to keep up and share insights.
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, one question I always like asking people is how they get into technology. And I know some people are just technologists from the beginning. Some people kind of grew into it. For me, I was never into tech. I got my first technology job before I owned a computer, funny enough. What's your background? Like, how did you get into it? What was your interest?
I love that you asked that. I went to pharmacy school, switched to business, and thought I was going to be a pharmaceutical sales rep. And Eli Lilly in Indianapolis told me I needed technical sales experience, and so I ended up getting technical sales experience at CDW in Chicago and never looked back.
Okay. And so that was just a conversation. When you went into CDW, and CDW is a company that has evolved, when you talk about companies that evolved over time, what
Yeah.
portion and what was your entry point into CDW?
It was an account manager role, and I thought, hey, this is a good opportunity to get that tech. I was actually building my own PC while I was in college, right?
Okay.
And so I was talking to the Dell rep, and he was telling me how cool it was to have access to all these different parts and pieces. And I thought, hey, if I can go from selling 3 pharmaceutical products to selling 55,000 SKUs, I'm going to learn a ton of stuff, and that'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started in the hardware portion. I think that's very much CDW's kind of starting point. I remember ordering from CDW back when I was an IT director in the early 2000s, and they were one of my, they just made it easy. One of my main suppliers. I wasn't anyone, you probably worked with enterprise accounts. I'd be a small, small fish in a big pond. But how did that evolve? How did you see that evolve from hardware? And then they've definitely expanded, and with your knowledge, expanding into networking, cloud, software. What was that evolution like for you and for them, or mainly for you? What does that look like?
Yeah. So when I started, it was in 2000. They were not quite $1 billion yet, and when I left in like 2017, they were 20 billion. So that there was exponential growth. There was, private equity. There was going public again. So got to see different sides of that. But the technology evolution started out with me looking up a 56K modem on a PCI, or
Yep.
or hey, I need some memory, and let me get my crucial memory calculator and find the right piece for you. And believe it or not, I worked in education. Like those mouse balls inside of a mouse, the little
Yep.
rolly things, students would steal them. I'd be shipping those things all the time. Like
Yeah.
start out there, and years later, I got to a point where then went to grad school, got my MBA, and we had to do a project. And through the Sales Leadership Academy, I said, okay, what are we going to do here? And I was starting to lose, and we evolved into doing data center stuff. And
Yeah.
I was working on like a DR project with EMC and a production in DR, like for like model, because that's back when, you put the colo DR and then you have the production in your facility, and that
Sure.
was DR. And I started losing to companies like SunGard, and me and the EMC rep are like, did you go behind my back? What happened here? And we're like, no, I didn't even know I wasn't a part of that deal. And that's when it clicked for me that these providers are starting to come into our space through the telecommunication companies, the acquisition of like Terramark, and it started to come together. So I proposed that we go to the cloud and have a cloud division, and that was kind of like 2013.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting, evolution there. I remember when I was an IT director and I had T1 lines, right? And you were mentioning dial up. It's funny, when I was an IT director, we had a T1 line and we were a printing company. So we were a large format printing company. We had to work with large graphics. We used WAMnet to upload and then FTP uploads. And it was painful, right? And I remember I bonded the T1s, just bonded, right? So I got to 3 meg and I was a hero. Like everyone was like, I can't believe how fast the internet is. And I doubled the speed. And it's just funny to see how that technology has grown. An interesting thing too that I've seen with this evolution into the cloud, and then you talk about VoIP, like voice over IP, is there was a maturation that needed to happen with bandwidth to really make all this cloud activity and even voice over IP and cloud voice happen, because the bandwidth hadn't really caught up to the need of these cloud architectures. I see something kind of similar, not in bandwidth with AI, but it could be in cloud, it could be in storage, but there's still a maturation of technology that's going to innovate into this new wave of AI. Does that make sense? You see kind of a same kind of evolution and need?
Yeah, and I think if you break it down, you go back to the Riverbed still had appliance with WAN optimization and VPN accelerator built into a box, and then it turned into SD-WAN, and what you just said. It's like, yeah, I've seen the incremental stages of just that piece of the technology. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were you ever, when you were back in your sales days back at CDW, I'm sure there was this time where the cell phone started being relevant, right? Because I remember it as well. And it was the BlackBerry. Were you BlackBerry? Like, did you get on the BlackBerry like kick, or what was your memory with that?
So I served high ed, and it was first the Palm, because
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
everyone, like Duke University had like a whole Palm pilot program, and every student got a
The
Palm
Palm Pilot.
pilot, and then
Yep.
it turned into the Palm Trio, and you had to do the little SD card to be able to play a game on it or whatever. And then what happened is the iPhone got in, right? And we just looked at it as like that's not a commercial product. That's a personal product. There's no place for the iPhone to be in
Right.
corporate America. And then everything clicked, and yeah, what happened after that with Nokia, and
Yeah.
so
I was not in an argument, but we'd always get in these discussions with me and my maintenance supervisor at the time. So I was the director of IT. He was the director over maintenance. And we were talking about the BlackBerry, how it had the buttons and the numbers to push, right? The actual physical buttons. And the iPhone was on the screen. And we were arguing back and forth that no one would ever like use an iPhone because the screen, you're not going to push the screen. It'll never be accurate. And at that time, you'd still push and it'd kind of move over there. It's interesting how wrong we were. Obviously, the iPhone, like you said, took off. The other interesting thing I'd like to get your input on, just when you think about the BlackBerry and where we were with cell phones back then, and from a business use case, and then what a cell phone is now, it's two different things. And right now, as we're having this AI conversation, I know this last couple of weeks, you and I have been able to have some really great thought leadership together and collaboration. If you take AI now, kind of the same thing with the cell phone, what it's going to be 4 years from now, that's probably going to be very, maybe as surprising, or do you think more surprisingly different? There's going to be some evolution here.
Yeah, I think you're talking about some technology inflection points. So you drew one of them up. And I used to use the iPhone as an example of the cloud because, I'm trying to teach like thousands of sales reps on the floor that are selling hardware and software how to sell cloud services right into this new ecosystem
Right.
that we bolted onto CDW. And that was always the analogy, like, hey, if you drop your iPhone in the bottom of Lake Michigan, what happens to your data? What happens to
Yeah.
your phone? It's like you go get another phone, you plug it in, it goes to the cloud. And, that was like the analogy, that was the inflection point.
Sure.
But really the inflection point was cloud, right? It's all cloud. And Apple was just using their device to illustrate how everything's up in the cloud. So the inflection point that we're in now, it reminds me, like even this weekend, I'm going, here it is again. This is back in 2013. This is where everything was going. Adobe went cloud. Office 365 went cloud. That was in 2012, 2013. And now we're at this AI inflection point. Whoa,
Yeah.
hang on. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is we were talking about the cloud here, and I had a conversation with, it was a couple weeks ago with Alec Afraides. He just retired from Intel. He's the VP over their edge networking, and he was talking about how with computer vision and a lot of the AI stuff, it's actually pushing stuff back to the edge. So we had this big push to the cloud, but now from a performance aspect, we're coming back a little bit to the edge, and I'm sure there'll be a balance. And that could be a little bit of what I was talking about from that technology advancement with circuits and speeds of circuits that needed to catch up. And maybe there's some things that need to happen in the cloud to catch up with the advancements of AI. But have you seen some of that too? Just a little bit of a pushback to the edge, to edge networking?
Yeah. I mean, there's always use cases where, it's mapping out where the user is, where the data is, where the compute needs to come in, where the device is. And it's a different strategy for all kinds of different use cases and organizations, but that's absolutely coming up more and more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested. You've kind of teased me with a couple like not meetings, but events you've been to and some things like that. And I know that we all get into different conversations according to our social network and our work and our professional network. But it seems like you're having some professional conversations pick up regarding AI. Your customer base and client base seems to be more interested, and obviously it's a hot topic. But what are some insights you can share and some things that you're seeing in the market from the executives that you're talking to?
Yeah. So I'm in the Charlotte metro area, and we have quite a bit of networking events where we go and listen to practitioners at major corporations that are talking about their initiatives. And I'm on the recruiting team to try to get panelists. And I just got one today, from a large global manufacturer with 300 locations. And she performed a successful AI implementation. So we want to get her and some other folks up there to talk about, what are the best practices? How can other companies prepare? And as I start to hear them talk, right? And yesterday I had a call with somebody who used to work at AWS, and he performed 150 150 factories and did a data strategy to map them to the cloud. And he did like Georgia Pacific, Whirlpool, like these big companies. And the stuff that he's talking about and the stuff that they're talking about are a little bit different than mid-market and
Yeah.
SMB and startup. So as you go down, you start to realize that there's a lot of different things that they have to deal with. And yeah,
Yeah, you know
I'm
what's
just
interesting?
saying,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying that there's like 4 different tiers that I've identified in my head.
So you think let's walk through those tiers. So you're talking like from the enterprise, you're talking like enterprise, mid-market, SMB, and then maybe like the entrepreneurial like aspect of AI, like the Gen AI stuff, or is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so enterprise, I think, they're going to have a lot more complex environment, the ability to make sure that all the data can flow is going to take years and years of modernization and data strategy and just incremental, let's get to that future state. But they need somebody really high level to map all of it together. They need different governance. They need different leadership culture. They need a very strong leader within the organization who can have a different skill set than what they might have needed 4 years ago. So it's a whole different ball game. And then when you go to the mid-market, and we'll just say mid-market and SMB, some mid-markets still want to try to do stuff in-house, right? And you're challenging them with, why do you want to do this in-house when you already have an out-of-the-box solution sitting there that can deliver value, speed to value very quickly? And then you have to convince them to say, why don't you do a different considered approach where I know you want to do some in-house and you want to build like a center of excellence or whatever it is around your AI initiative, but bring them in and augment them and let your team learn and have upskill, speed to upskilling, I call it. So that's another tier. And then you have SMB that they're like, we just need to go faster and keep up with our competition. So we're just going to do it all in the cloud.
Right.
And then the startups, they just have a whole different like set of SaaS tools that they can stitch together and go very quickly. So
yeah, absolutely. I was saying I found it surprising that how the noise level from SMB when you talk about vendor noise, right, and especially in the AI space. I know cybersecurity I feel like is very noisy right now as well, and it's been for a while. It seems like there's a new cyber company coming out every week, but with AI. There's so much vendor fatigue and vendor noise. And especially when you get down again into that entrepreneur, into the small business, because there's so many, I guess, Gen AI tools from video creation to marketing creation to content creation and all this stuff. And it just gets messy. And I think I don't want to call it a .com crash, but we're going to see a clearing out, right? The dust is going to settle eventually, and there's going to be a lot of companies that there might be consolidation, but not a lot are out. Now, the interesting thing is that I've seen as you get up to the enterprise space, there's not as much noise. But they're still hard to find these use cases. And you and I have had a lot of conversations about finding these vendors out there that actually serve business use cases. Right now, the thought leadership is all like, try this new shiny toy of Gen AI and look at this picture it takes and look at this video that it creates and look at the music it creates. These are all fun and cool, but it's not really business use case when you get to enterprise level. Are you kind of seeing the same thing that as we get up into that mid and enterprise, it's not so much that it's vendor fatigue. It's just, there's a lot of like, where do we go? Like, what do we do?
Yeah. I'm laughing because, all those tools that you're talking about are the things that you and I are sitting there poking around on our laptop over.
I'm saying I play with them all the time. I'm not saying I don't use them. I'm subscribed to so many tools all the time. I've got to remember to cancel because I get these charges. But yeah, I agree. They are cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. But yeah, you start working your way up the stack and you start realizing like where are the business outcomes that can really help advance an organization. And I think the next layer would be let's call it like voice and communication, right? That's a whole section of AI tools across all different use cases, and it can improve your customer experience. It can do sentiment analysis in a call center. You can use AI to stay in compliance. So let's say that you're like a collection agency and you can't say certain things like, hey, doesn't your uncle have a job? And like that is out of compliance. So some AI wouldn't pick it up because you didn't say a certain word. But now AI is improving to where it's contextual analysis. You're inferring a violation and it picks that up. So it's getting better, right? There's things that you can do across your organization to do real-time actionable insights and do sandboxing and correlation of if we do this, then that, and then you push it out to the agents and then you tell them it starts training them on doing that type of activity because you're going to get the outcome. I'm thinking about other use cases where you can train it to identify the top performers or what are they doing different than the bottom performers, and then start training the bottom performers, start acting like the top performers. So I think from a call center, there's a lot of different use cases where you can go in and have.
Oh, Absolutely. I think for the conversational AI is probably, well, and call center is one of the high, probably most replicated use cases right now, just because it's relevant from a voice AI agent to, again, analytics and actionable insights like you're talking about. One of the things I've been looking at recently, and not recently, but since I've really been diving into AI, is accuracy, right, in the model. And I think that's something that healthcare and maybe finance have had a little bit of concern about. And I know there are models and things coming out that are reducing inaccurate responses and reducing these responses that could, in healthcare, it could be potentially reputation and a lawsuit. But then I also think back and I kind of laugh because I look at my training in technology, and like I've worked for several different technology vendors, and just something that makes me laugh when you talk about inaccuracy of information. And you go through the training and they'd be talking about their technology, and they'd be like, "We're the only one that does this. No one else does it." And you go to your customer, you'd be so excited, and be like, "Hey, guess what? We're the only one that does this." And they'd be like, "No, these guys do it. These guys were just here yesterday and they do it." And you're like, like they were feeding me the same, the humans were giving me inaccurate information, let alone the AI. But I do see this confirmation bias in AI, and I think it's good. I don't know if you've seen it playing around with the Gen AI models, is it wants to please and wants to almost confirm what you're saying. And I found it kind of fun to challenge AI as I'm kind of, we talk about the tools and playing with it, but to kind of do this challenge, like, hey, challenge me with my thought. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me how I can improve, because I don't think AI naturally does that. Do you see that when you're messing around with the AI models?
I, it's funny because I converse with AI, the chat bots or whatever. More now. I don't bug my wife as much anymore because I just go, "Oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about this?" And it's
Right.
just like a conversation, right? But I'm learning so much right now, and it's a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
you can do a lot with it. But I think the I think as we're going up the stack, we were talking about the AI, the conversational AI, and communications and customer experience and uh, omni-channel,
Yeah.
aggregation of data and internal and external customer experience. You can do all those different things, but we can go up the stack a little bit now, right? This is where it
Yeah.
gets a little bit different, right? I'd say most of the channel understands AI and communications, but then
Sure.
now we start getting into the okay, now you have your CRM, you have your voice, you have your infrastructure, you have your databases, and you have all these different data silos, but they're not talking to each other right now. Or
Yes.
they're sitting in a data lake and they don't know what to do with it. Now there's that level, right?
Yeah. Yeah, this to me and what you're talking about here, and we hear hyper personalization in AI, and I'm very excited about that because I do actually want my AI to know me very well. I want it to know how I think, how I speak, how I type. That's helpful to me. But now I think about businesses, and hyper personalization of the business is super important. And you're spot on. Right now, we have an AI for marketing, and we have an AI for sales, and we have an AI for accounting, and we've got an AI for shipping. Where AI is going to be the most powerful, and the companies that are going to get the most power out of it, it might be an expensive uplift right now, is someone who can take all your data, unstructured data, and make structured, not recommendations, but again, insights, and give you structured insights off of unstructured data from all the data together. And then you take the internal data, and now you start adding external data, because we have so much information, to external data from weather patterns to events going on, especially when you're talking about retail and supply chain and everything like that. Now you start combining your holistic internal data with external resources, and now we're really getting into some interesting predictive and real-time insights that AI can do. Do you see that as well?
Yeah. I mean, just had a call talking about that exact thing. We're going
Yeah.
through case studies, right? And just examples. And, we're talking about like machine learning forecasting for a restaurant chain and being able to come in and look at the hours that they work and the location and geography and the weather.com data and the holiday schedules. And it predicts, the restaurant sales by location. And it gets smarter and smarter over
Yeah.
time. That's valuable. But I think we're like, in the time of a data scientist. Like it's the age of the data scientist. That's where we're at right now. Because if
Yep.
you're a provider in the market and you're telling me that you can do cloud infrastructure and you can do, if you don't have a data scientist team, that's a big gap right now.
Yep. And that's where you talk about hiring out, right? And now this brings up another dilemma. Okay, so you've heard in cybersecurity. I know you are able, you yourself branch into various technologies from cyber to whatever. So this will make sense to you. There's like 2 million. There's been like 2 million open cybersecurity jobs. Like we can't fill those jobs fast enough. There's always a shortage in it. Now you look at AI, and exactly what you just mentioned is this need for data scientists, and it's probably too expensive, just like a full-time cybersecurity expert is for that mid-market to bring in a full-time data scientist. But man, I'll bet you data scientists are probably even more of a rare resource. Like a real data scientist is more of a real rare resource than even a cybersecurity expert right now, right?
I think you're drawing a good parallel to the war on talent, 4 or 5 years ago around cybersecurity and where we're at now. Absolutely. And when you think about geography too, the return to work, some companies are saying we're only going to hire if you can come into the office because we're going back to the office. And good luck trying to find a data scientist who's like in the middle of wherever. So if
Right.
that's another thing you got to think about from a leadership perspective of
Yeah.
getting talent. And I think we're getting into that age too, just with the economic headwinds of hiring FTEs. And
Yeah.
okay, I have friends that are in staffing. It's a challenge right now getting placement, right?
Yeah.
So that's one piece. And so now it's turning into fractional labor. And then it turns into, okay, how can we augment our existing team? And then how do we completely outsource or nearshore or offshore? And then you have all these conversations across that spectrum, and it's pretty interesting times.
Yeah, it really is. Jumping back, I was just thinking, and I may have shared this company with you, but Ikigai Labs, they have really defined and specialized as LGM, so a large graphical model, not LLM, not large language model. And it's really specific about tabular and timestamp data. So you might want to check them out with that conversation. I was just thinking of them as I remember, because they do really good, especially in that retail and supply chain, making predictive analytics off of unstructured data, but really specifically around that time stamped and tabular data. So just a good company, one of those good finds out there where you're like, oh, you guys are doing something unique. And they have a good, speaking of data scientists, they have some great data scientist teams out there. So another question I like to ask, and this is more of the philosophical. One of the things I like about AI is you've got the psychology conversation, the philosophical conversation, of course, the technology conversation. But it goes back to Elon Musk Neuralink. I always like asking this. If you could, right now it's being used for more, if you're paraplegic, you can actually move, maybe start moving your hands, but you can move your eye on the computer or start making more connections and being more active. But if you're able to plant a AI chip in your brain and speak every language, have hyper intelligence, and it was safe, where do you fall on that? Is that something to be interested in?
I would have to. I would be a late adopter on that. On the hype cycle, I would be way over here. I would not be an early adopter. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It'd be, I go back to the cybersecurity, my cybersecurity mind, and thinking, okay, now if my brain could get hacked, and I think about like Beetlejuice, like how all of a sudden they all start dancing. Like my brain, I've talked about my ADD. It starts going all over the
yeah.
place and down a rabbit hole. But I think for me, and I always say when people ask what would your superhero power be, it would be to speak every language, and that would be difficult. The other thing I think from a psychology standpoint is, what's that differentiator then? If we all speak every language, then speaking every language isn't special anymore, right? If we're all hyper intelligent, then being hyper intelligent isn't special anymore. So it does push more into the EQ. So I guess AI still hasn't really mastered the EQ aspect of it, which now just reminded me of another topic I always like to talk about. And it is that EQ topic. So there is a lot of fear, and maybe rightfully so. You just saw Elon Musk in the Tesla robot. And you see some kind of scary things like that. And you see AI maybe replacing humanity. In fact, the port strike that they just had, one of the things that they had in that port strike was like to prevent automation from happening. And I'm a believer of AI being a force multiplier for humanity, not a replacer. And I think that's why people in whatever your job is, you need to understand how AI is applicable in your job, because I don't think AI is going to replace you, but I think people who understand how AI enhances their job could replace you. But what's your thoughts with that? Like overall, the AI over humanity, AI with humanity, not maybe doom and gloom, maybe not. What's your thoughts?
I think there's a couple of different tiers of, call it AI, ML, and it's where you could either have human only, you could have AI in shadow mode. You access it when you need it. You can have it assisting you in real time. You could have just partial automation where it does most of the work and you finish it off. And then you can have like the machine does it all, right? And that's more like just automation. But that's kind of the spectrum. And then it's a good question, because I start thinking about like my kids and when they go to college and what college they're going to go to and what that college is, how that college is going to look at this type of technology. And if they're going to be completely traditional and say, no, we're not going to allow any chat GPT or whatever engines to do any work, you have to do it this way, versus a university that's like, we're going to teach them how to do prompt engineering. And I'm like, you have to be careful right now, I think, in higher education, which path you go down, because if you look at the HR recruiting, the resumes, the talent that you're looking for in organizations, you really have to cater to this type of technology and the people who can use it the best, because that's going to help you advance. And so those are conversations that I'm having. And then I'm also having conversations with people that internally have people that are, we'll say, or they're slowing down innovation because their risk profile is so high from a compliance standpoint or whatever. And you have to look at, do you have the right people on the bus in your organization who really want to drive innovation, instead of saying things like, well, we can't do that because of this. It's the compliance officer that says, we have to figure out how to make this work so that we can maintain compliance and still go faster and innovate. So there's just a lot of like layers of what I was talking about in between HR and high ed and leadership in organizations. So
great response. One of the things I compare, especially in education, what I compare AI to in education is the calculator. And I remember back in high school, you could not use a calculator. Now, fast forward to college, I'm getting a psychology degree right now. So 4 years ago, I took a statistics class, one of those beginning statistics class. Not only was I using a calculator, I was using an Excel spreadsheet, I was using online tools, and none of that was frowned upon. It was totally like, hey, here's the tools to help you with your statistical calculations. And what I will also say, though, about a calculator is I can use one, but a mathematician, like someone who really understands math, can really manipulate like a calculator beyond what I can. They know all the symbols, they know everything it does. I can't. And I think AI is going to be very similar. Is sure, you can write an AI article, but someone who is also a writer who knows how to talk to AI to get the best out of it, but also go in and edit and refine the response, is going to get more out of AI. Even an artist, I think an artist who can explain from their artistic creativity to AI is going to enhance. So I do kind of see AI being this tool, almost like a calculator, that we're going to have the knowledge, but also have this interpretive knowledge of how to interpret these responses of AI. It's going to change things, but it's definitely an interesting conversation, right?
yeah, and it should speed up productivity, right? Because it's now getting you to the 20-yard line, and you just need the human with the EQ, the rational brain to say it's good, it's ready to go. But when you're talking about statistics, that was one of my favorite classes. So doing those confidence intervals and standard deviations, and like, I wouldn't have to map all that stuff out if I was in college. I would use a prompt to give me the answer and the whole written formula.
Absolutely. And I took that before AI. So I still had to plug in the Excel like calculations and everything. And now you could have just gone into GPT, right? And just said, "Hey, can you give me all this stuff?" And it would have just like spit it out beautifully for me. But you still have to have a good understanding of what that is to be able to describe what you need properly and have a good response. So, all right, we're at the 30-minute mark. So which means that, yeah, I try to wrap it up. I could talk to you for 5 hours, but eventually I know your time's valuable. Last thoughts, of course, anything on your mind, just go ahead and share last thoughts and close this out.
Yeah, I just think, it's one of like we started out talking about the 56K modem and we ended up with, AI, right?
Right.
The and the inflection points when we talked about the phone, we talked about cloud, and now we're talking about AI. This is an exponential time. I mean, 2 years ago, that was 2022 is when the LLM started to become a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so much in its infancy. I think we just need to be ready to dig in and learn, like just always be learning right now and really um, seek in because you just don't want to put your head in the sand and not pay attention about what's going on.
Right. Absolutely. Awesome. Jason, thanks for jumping on with me. Your insights were great. It was also a very fun conversation. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, anytime, man. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks.